All right. The Lord also said that you shall not abuse your power or commerce generally to enslave or coerce anyone. If one of your brethren becomes poor, desperate, and fall into poverty among you, then you shall help him like a stranger or a sojourner, that he may live with you. Take no usury or interest from him, but fear your Lord, that your brother may live with you. You should not lend him your money for usury, nor lend him your food as a profit. The Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your Lord. And if one of your brethren who dwells by you becomes poor and sells himself to you, you shall not compel him to serve as a slave. As a hired servant and a sojourner, he shall be with you and shall serve you until year of Jubilee. And then he shall depart from you, he and his children with him, and shall return to his own family. He shall return to the possession of his fathers. For they are thy servants whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. They shall not be sold as slaves. You shall not rule over him with rigor, but you shall fear your Lord. Note above that it says that people who are poor or desperate should be treated not as slaves, but as sojourners, which today means non-residents and transient foreigners. This is exactly the condition that our members are required to have. The most famous example in the Bible of the violation of the above prohibitions against usury was how Pharaoh used a famine to enslave his entire country, including the Israelites. Joseph deals with the famine. Now there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the grain which they bought, and Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. So when the money failed in the land of Egypt, in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Pharaoh and said, "Give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the money has failed." Then Joseph said, "Give your livestock, and I will give you bread for your livestock if the money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the cattle, the herds, and for the donkeys. Thus he fed them with bread in exchange for all their livestock that year. When that year had ended, they came to him the next year and said to him, "We will not hide from my lord that our money is gone. My lord also has our herds of livestock. There is nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants of Pharaoh. Give us seed, that we may live and not die, that the land may not be desolate." Then Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. For every man of the Egyptians sold his field, because the famine was severe upon them. So the land became Pharaoh's. And as for the people, he moved them into the cities, from one end of the borders of Egypt to the other end. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had rations allotted to them by Pharaoh, and they ate their nations which Pharaoh gave them. Therefore they did not sell their lands. Then Joseph said to the people, "Indeed, I have bought you and your land this day for Pharaoh. Look, here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land, And it shall come to pass in the harvest that you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh, 4/5 shall be your own as seed for the field and for your food for those of your households and as foods for your little ones. So they said, You have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of our Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. And Pharaoh made it a law over the land of Egypt to this day that Pharaoh should have 1/5, except for the land of the priests only, which will not become Pharaoh's. Eventually, the Lord liberated the Israelites in the famous story of Moses, the Exodus out of Egypt, but not before he brought a series of curses on Pharaoh for his usury in Exodus 4. Another similar source of usury was the Canaanites in the Bible. If you wish to investigate further, we talk about this section later. It is very interesting about the above story of usury occurred in the land of Canaan for that very reason. It is interesting to note that the main political objection that most Muslim countries have to the United States is related to usury created by the abuse of commerce. The Quran forbids lending money at interest. Libya and Iraq both became the target of war and intervention because they wanted to abandon the Fed Reserve fiat currency system and implement gold instead of paper money. Muslims refer to this usury as imperialism and literally hate it. Iran's own leader calls for debt to America, and usury is the main reason he does so. There is no question that the abuse of commerce to create inequality, servitude, and usury is satanic because the Bible says this was the essence of Satan's greatest sin. The Muslims are correct to peacefully protest it and oppose it. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty, and you were in Eden, the garden of the Lord. Every precious stone was your covering. The sardius, topaz, and diamond, beryl, onyx, and jasper, sapphire, turquoise, and emerald with gold. The workmanship of your trembles and pipes was prepared for you on the day you were created. You were the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You were the holy mountain of the Lord. The walked back and forth in the midst of fiery stones. You were perfect in your ways from the days you were created, till iniquity was found in you. By the abundance of your trading, you became filled with violence within, and you sinned. Therefore, they cast you as a profane thing out of the mountain of the Lord. And I destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the fiery stones. Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. I cast you to the ground. I laid you before kings, that they might gaze at you. You defiled your sanctuaries by the multitude of your iniquities, by the iniquity of your trading. Therefore I brought fire from your midst. It devoured you, and I turned you to ashes upon the earth. In the sight of all who saw you, all who knew you among the peoples are astonished at you. You have become a horror, and shall be no more forever. That is not to say that we condone the use of violence or tend to oppose usury. However, more peaceful means are available, and especially that of withdrawing your domicile and sponsorship of usurious governments and becoming non-residents, non-persons. We conclude in the above document that the only way that changing domicile and thereby removing funding and civil jurisdiction from the Gov can result in violence is if the Gov actively interferes with you receiving the benefits of doing so. When they do that, violence, revolution, anarchy, and even war is inevitable eventually. We refer to the systematic implementation of usury as the greatest sin of our present government because it was Satan's greatest sin. The Fed Reserve counterfeiting franchise is its foundation. We describe the government as an economic terrorist to the District of Columbia as the district of criminals, and its politicians as criminals because of it. It's all based on the love of money. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. It is our sincere belief that if we as a country had stuck to the requirements earlier in our external relations, the problem we have with terrorism from foreign nations could be significantly reduced. The United States commits usury and economic terrorism against foreign countries, so they reciprocate with violent terrorism. But both the types of terrorism are equally evil. The economic interventionism and the coercion that the usury leads to is a direct violation of the requirements of justice itself. Justice is legally defined as the right to be left alone. If we want to be left alone by the terrorists and treated with respect, then we have to quit meddling in their affairs. Invading and bombing their countries mainly for economic reasons, or using our economic might to coerce them with sanctions. You will usually reap what you sow. The United States as a country sows economic violence as we reap physical violence. This is the inevitable consequence of the fact that we are all equal, and any attempt to make us unequal inevitably produces wars, violence, anarchy, and political instability. Therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for this is the law of the prophets. The U.S. Supreme Court stated the above slightly differently when they declared the first income tax unconstitutional, which was implemented as a franchise tax that discriminated against one class of people at the expense of another, and therefore produced inequality. The income tax laws under consideration is marked by discriminating features which affect the whole law. It discriminates between those who receive an income of $4,000 and those who do not. It does. The light. Retaliates, in my judgment, by this arbitrary discrimination, the whole legislation. Hamilton says in one of his papers, the Continentalist, yeah. The genius of liberty reprobates everything arbitrary or discriminatory in taxation. It exalts that every man, by a definite and general rule, should know what proportion of his property the state demands. Whatever liberty we may boast of in theory, it cannot exist in fact while arbitrary assessments continue. The legislation and the discrimination it makes is class legislation. Whenever a distinction is made in the burdens of law, imposes, or in the benefits it confers on any citizen by reason of their birth or wealth or religion, it is class legislation, and leads inevitably to oppression and abuse and to general unrest and disturbance in society, wars and political conflict, violence, anarchy. It It was hoped and believed that the great amendments to the Constitution which followed the late Civil War had rendered such legislation impossible for all future time, but the adjectival legislation reappears in the act under consideration. It is the same in essential character as that of the English Income Statute of 1691, which taxed Protestants at a certain rate, Catholics as a class, or double the rate of Protestants, and Jews at another and separate rate. Under wise and unconstitutional legislation, every citizen should contribute his proportion, however small the sum, to the support of the God, and it is no kindness to urge any of our citizens to escape from that obligation. If he contributes the smallest mite of his energy earnings to that purpose, he will have a greater regard for the government and more self-respect for himself, freeing that though he is poor in fact, he is not a pauper of his government, and it is to be hoped that whatever woes and embarrassments may petty our people, they may never lose their manliness and self-respect. Those qualities preserved, they will ultimately triumph over all reserves of fortune. Here I close my opinion. I could not say less to view of questions of such gravity that go down to the very foundations of the government. If the provisions of the Constitution can be set aside by an act of Congress, where is the course of usurpation to end? The present assault upon capital is but the beginning. It will be but the stepping stone to others larger and more sweeping, till our political contest will become a war of the poor against the rich, a war of constantly growing in intensity and bitterness. If the court sanctions the power of discriminating taxation and nullifies the uniformity mandate of the Constitution, as said by one who has been all his life a student of our institutions, it will mark the hour when the sure decadence of our present government will commence. If the purely arbitrary limitation of 4,000 in the person law can be sustained, none having less than that amount of income being assessed or taxed for the support of the government, the limitation of future Congresses may be fixed at a much larger sum, or at 5 or 10 to $20,000. Parties possessing an income of that amount alone being bound to bear the burdens of government, or the limitations may be designated as such an amount of the Board of Walking Delegates may deem necessary. There is no safety in allowing the limitation to be adjusted except in strict compliance with the mandates of the Constitution, which require its taxation, if imposed by direct taxes, to be apportioned among the states according to their representation, and if imposed by indirect taxes, to be uniform in operation and so far as practicable in proportion to their property, equal upon all citizens, unless the rule of the Constitution governs. A majority may fix the limitation at such rate as will not include any of their own number. We talk about our opposition to usurious commerce that produce inequality in our Disclaimer, Section 9. Approach towards hate speech and hate crime. This is not to enforce or support hate speech or hate crimes, violent thoughts, deeds, or actions against any particular person's group, entity, government, permanent force, intelligence agents, overpaid politician, head of state, queen, delegate, ambassador, spies, post soldier, bell cook, security flag, contractor, dog, cat, or mouse, Walmart employee, a hidden reptile, or deceased entity without a PD physical body. The foundation of the religious belief and practices underlying this is refusal to contract with or engage in commerce with any and every government. Black's Law's Dictionary defines commerce as intercourse. Commerce, intercourse, by way of trade and traffic, money instead of seamen, between different peoples or states and the citizens and inhabitants thereof, including not only the purchase, sale, and exchange of commodities, but also the instrumentalities, government, and agencies by which it is promoted, and by the means of the appliances by which it is carried on. Hence, this advocates a religious refusal to engage in sex or intercourse or commerce with any government. In fact, the Bible even describes people who violate this prohibition as playing the harlot. And personifies that harlot as Babylon the great harlot in Revelation 17:5, which is fornicating with the beast, which it defines as governments, Revelation 19:19. The Lord brought you upon Egypt's slavery and brought you to the land of which I swore to your fathers, and I said, I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall make no covenant, contract, or franchise or agreement of any kind with the inhabitants of this corrupt pagan land. You shall tear down their man government worshiping socialist altars, but you have not obeyed the Lord. Why have you done this? Therefore, I also said, I will not drive them out before you, but they will become as thorns, terrors, and persecutors in your side, and their gods will be a snare slavery to you. So it was when the angel of the Lord spoke those words, all of the children of Israel, that the people lifted up their voices and wept. Do, do you not know the friendship with the Lord is enmity with with the world is enmity with the Lord? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend, citizen, resident, taxpayer, inhabitant, or subject under a king or political ruler of the world, or any man-made kingdom other than the Lord's kingdom, makes himself an enemy of the Lord. You shall make no covenant, contract, or franchise with them foreign pagans, nor with their pagan government, gods, laws, or judges. They shall not dwell in your land, and you shall not dwell in theirs, to becoming a resident in the process of contracting with them, lest they make you sin against the Lord. For if you serve their gods under contract or agreement or franchise, it will surely be a snare to you. Pure and undefiled religion before the Lord and the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their trouble, and to keep oneself unspotted from the world, the obligations and concerns of the world. You have no other Lord, including political rulers, governments, or earthly laws, before the Lord, or the commandments. I said covenants, what the fuck? Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel the priest in a theocracy at Ramah, and said to him, Look, you, the priests within the theocracy, are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now make us a king or political ruler to judge us like all the nations and be over them. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, Give us a king or political ruler to rule us. So Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, Heed the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have rejected the Lord, that I should not reign over them, according to all the works which they have done since the day that the Lord brought them up out of Egypt, even to this day with which they have forsaken the Lord God is their only king, lawgiver, and judge, and served other gods, so that they are doing to you also government, political rulers become the object of idolatry. Do not walk in the statutes of your fathers, the heathens, nor observe their judgments, nor defile yourself with their pagan government idols. The Lord, walk in my statutes, keep my judgments, and do them. Hallow my Sabbath, and they will be a sign between me and you, that you may know that the Lord is with you. Where is separation of church and state when they really need it? Keeping in mind that Christians as individuals are the church, and secular society is the state as legally defined. The John Birch Society agrees with us on the subject of not contracting with anyone in the following video. Trading Away Your Freedom by Foreign Entanglements by John Birch Society on YouTube. Pastor David Jeremiah of Turning Point Ministries also agrees with us on the subject. The Church in Satan's City. President Obama also said that in the right of everyone to economically and politically disassociate with the government, so why don't the agencies of the government recognize this fact on every form you use to interact with them? President Obama says the U.S. will not impose its political or economic system on anyone. On YouTube. We wrote an entire book on how the economically and politically disassociated fulfillment of Obama's promise above, and yet the government hypocritically actively interferes with the economically and politically disassociating in defiance of President Obama's assurance and promise. Bunch of hypocrites. The government's tendency to compel everyone into a commercial relationship with them is defined by the Bible as the essence of Satan himself. Therefore, the religious practice and sexual orientation of avoiding commerce with government is the essence of our religious faith. By the abundance of your Satan's trading, you became filled with violence within, and you sinned. Therefore I cast you as a profane thing out of the mountain of the Lord, and I destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the fiery stones. As religion towards the Lord is a branch of universal righteousness, he is not an honest man that is not devout. So righteousness towards men is a branch of true religion, for he is not a godly man that is not honest, nor can he expect that his devotion should be accepted for. 1. Nothing is more offensive to the Lord than deceit in commerce. A false balance is here put for all manner of unjust and fraudulent practices of our public disservice, and dealing with any person within the public, which are all in abomination to the Lord, and render those abominable hated to him that allow themselves in the use of such accursed arts of thriving. It is an affront to justice, which the Lord is the patron of, as well as a wrong to our neighbor, whom the Lord is the protector of. Men in government make light of such frauds, and think there is no sin in that which there is money to be got by, and while it passes undiscovered, they cannot blame themselves for it. A blot is no blot till it is hit, but they are not the less an abomination to the Lord, who will be the avenger of those that are defrauded by their brethren. 2. Nothing is more pleasing to the Lord than fair and honest dealing, nor more necessary to make us and our devotions acceptable to him. A just weight is his delight. He himself goes by a just weight, and holds the scale of judgment with an even hand, and therefore is pleased with those that are herein followers of him. A false balance, whether it be in the federal courtroom, or in the government, or in the marketplace, cheats under pretense of doing right most exactly, and therefore is the greatest abomination to the Lord. Any individual, groups, or especially government worker that makes us the target of discrimination, violence, selective enforcement, or hate because of this form of religious practice or sexual orientation or absence is practicing hate speech based both on our religious beliefs and our sexual orientation as legally defined. Furthermore, all readers and governments are given reasonable timely notice that the terms of use for the information and services available through this mandate that any attempt to compel us into a commercial or tax relationship with any government shall constitute 1. Purposeful element in satisfaction of the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, 28 U.S. Code Chapter 97. 2. A waiver of official, judicial, and sovereign immunity. 3. A commercial invasion within the meaning of Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution. 4. A tort cognizable as a Fifth Amendment taking without compensation. 5. A commercial attempt at identity theft by wrongfully associating us with a civil status of a citizen, resident, taxpayer, etc. 6. Duress as legally defined. See Affidavit of Duress. Illegal tax enforcement by de facto officers. The government crimes documented on this fall within the ambit of 18 U.S. Code 2381 for treason. The penalty mandated by the law for these crimes is death. We demand that actors in the Department of Justice for both the states and the federal government responsible for prosecuting these crimes of treason do so as required by law. A failure to do so is also an act of treason punishable by death. Since murder is not only a crime, but a violent crime pursuant to 18 U.S. Code 1111, then the government itself can also be classified as terrorists. It is also ludicrous to call people who demand the enforcement of the death penalty for the crimes documented as terrorists. If that were true, every jurist who sat on a murder trial in which the death penalty applied would also have to be classified as and prosecuted as a terrorist. Bunch of hypocrites. The moral of the story is that the main difference between Christ and Satan was how they handled privileges and franchises, and whether they tried to use them as a means to create inequality or usury or slavery or servitude between them and others while they were on the earth. As we say repeatedly throughout this document, franchises is your all caps letter name, are the main method used to destroy and undermine equality of all under the law. Any attempt to implement them in any government system is satanic and emulates Satan's greatest sin. Those in government who institute or enforce franchises, your all caps letter name, will therefore get the same punishment as Satan did for exactly the same reasons. All right, peace out.